Yeah, but
do
you have like a
this.
Rube Goldberg project in your house. Your bed rolls up, you're on the treadmill.
Like Pee Wee Herman?
The bed's shoes get put on by yourself.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Educational Programs and Services Committee meeting. I am Chair Emily McCormick. To my left is Trina Sharsmith. To my right is JP Prego. I also have Dr. Roach. I have James Roth. I have Sarah Rothwell. I have Amy Coyle. I have Carol Gibbon, and I have Andrea Farina here as well. Let's get started, and we will start with the approval of the August 15th.
Motion.
Okay, minutes. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you very much. First item on tonight's agenda, QPR training for the 9th graders and Hope for Tomorrow for the 7th graders.
Yeah, so we have committed to anytime we do a student presentation or assembly, we just mention it at Educational Programs and Services. It is Suicide Prevention Month. We have made a committed effort to provide programming for both parents and students across the district in a variety of ways, but QPR is now out 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
For our 9th graders, this will be our first year for Hope for Tomorrow, but it's also suicide prevention, just tailored for our middle level students. So that is 7th grade.
So Hope for Tomorrow is another form of suicide prevention
Correct,
counseling.
just appropriate for our middle school students in 7th grade. So those are respectively October 9th and 10th. Being offered, our 9th graders take it during PSATs, our 7th graders are taking it during their school day. What we do try to do is do a parent preview, as we always have for QPR. That is October 2nd. It is virtual from 6 to 8. I would say we do have parents who attend. I don't know if they actually have 9th graders or not, but it's open to anyone, and we send it out in our community blast.
Do they sign up ahead of time, or is it
They
just?
do. There is a registration, so that went out in our community update. We'll send it out. The principals are also sending it out from their buildings as well. We do allow parents to request an exemption from participation, and so that goes right to the building principals. And so those two events are planned for next month.
You said Hope for Tomorrow is October 10th?
Yes.
And sorry, does it say when QPR is in the 9th grade? What date?
10-9.
That's the ninth.
The 9th, and then the virtual for parents is the 2nd. Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
It's an annual thing, they offset the PSAT. So 10th graders come in to take PSAT, 9th graders get QPR, and that's offset with Link Crew, reconnecting with their mentor mentees for some team building type of thing. So it's kind of a nice.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Might as well get it in.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, with the PSAT and the schedule, and from being in school, have certain kids testing and whatever else, kind of somewhat isolated and doing their thing, so.
Yeah, okay.
Set up for a while.
Okay. Anything else on QPR?
No?
Anybody have any other questions?
I was just gonna say I was poking around Hope for Tomorrow because we've done QPR
Yeah.
before. And Hope for Tomorrow was new, and I was reading up on it. It looks like it's a pretty interesting program that they're gonna be doing, so.
Yeah, and truthfully, it'll be the first time that I've participated in that program. I have not participated. I've participated in QPR. But we have worked with mobile crisis and access services quite extensively for several years. And so, they've definitely been our partner in that grade level in particular is a sweet spot for us in terms of suicide prevention.
So to be able to give you direct feedback from my kids.
Great.
They'll be honest.
All right, the comprehensive planning update.
Yeah, so we also use educational programs and services as one of the vehicles to continuously try and communicate comprehensive planning efforts. We have, as administration and as a district put a lot of time and effort into comprehensive planning. This will not be any different. But what I do want to share is what our timeline looks like. We talked about this a little. I want to show and talk about a few resources because I know we host this meeting. We did send invitations out. We have currently 53 participants.
I'm one.
And it's a mix of staff, students, parents, and community members. Many of you know we sent out those surveys. We started last spring. We continued this fall to try and get additional respondents. We have about 833 responses, which is really good. But so Tuesday night is our first comprehensive planning meeting, and just from a long-term perspective, that first meeting with that group is really to look at our vision and develop a portrait of a graduate, which is not something the district did in its last comprehensive planning timeframe. But so we're going to use that survey data, and I can show you a little bit what that looks like, a little sneak peek. But we are working on a forward-facing dashboard to share publicly around some of those responses, right? So, you know, often we hear from our stakeholders, you know, how did you make that decision, or what kind of information did you use when you know, decided this and that, and it could be anything. And so really, to create that level of transparency, we wanted to put that information up on our dashboards. And so we'll be going back to this information and helping to derive the vision and the portrait of a graduate. You will see that we're working on specific, right? This is an overall dashboard, but we do have dashboards relevant, and that is just distilling down to the student data and just the student data. So we'll be working through those data sets in a series of meetings. The first one, as I mentioned, is really to do the vision and portrait. Our second meeting in November is to look at what our goals and outcomes are, right? So once we know what our vision is, that's our future forecast on the district. What we know we want all students to graduate with, then we have to look at what does the data tell us about how far we are away from achieving
So
that.
that's what you mean when you say portrait of a graduate? Like, what do we
Correct.
want
What
them-
are the skills?
What are the skills you want them to
Essentially,
have?
it's a skills question, and really, it's every student should have X. And so there are questions in our surveys that were tailored. Actually, it says, what skills should students graduate with? And so we'll take a look at that as a team. And then we'll decide in our second meeting, you know, how far are we from that and our ideal future for the district, come up with some goals and outcomes, as well as make suggestions around professional development. There is subcommittee work that happens in between on the back end of the comprehensive plan. And then our final meeting, we'll pull all of that information together and, you know, review it as a larger stakeholder group. Just as a reminder, we will come back to educational programs and services to also provide an update, because the stakeholder group is 53. I think it'll probably end up around 55, but we want to make sure our community always has the opportunity to look and see what we're doing.
People?
And-
53 people?
Huh?
53 people?
53 people.
Okay.
On the stakeholder group.
There are like
Yep.
cats and dogs.
I don't know. No, I was like, is 53? I'm like, from 1953? Like, I
Yeah,
don't,
53
okay.
individuals will be participating in our stakeholder group, but we'll come back here just so we can show what that group is producing and get feedback. We also have engaged our professional education committee, which is a cross-section of our professional staff, to also look at that. So we'll try to get it from every angle, so people know that we're being transparent. We have used our comprehensive plan for as our seminal document. Why are you doing that professional development? Why did you adopt that program? It's in there. That's why we do it. And so we want to make sure we have created opportunity for feedback along the way. February 10th is that last stakeholder group, so our February EPS meeting. You know, we're trying to really tie it into those locations. We've wrapped our professional ed meetings around that. And then as is always the case with the comprehensive plan, it sits out. So we present it to the board, it sits out for 30 days. We are talking about creating a location on our website to collect feedback digitally. We used to set it at the Ed Center, and people could come in and leave notes. We had one visitor in the last 2 comprehensive. So maybe
At least it's there.
maybe on the website with a form, we might get something else, and we'll always share that feedback. We would be seeking board approval at the March
We should put it
27th.
on social media, it'll give us lots of comments.
We'll be seeking board approval March 27th, and then the plan is due for submission March 31st to the state.
53 people though. These 53 people, they already signed up? Okay. It was in the email. Did I sign up?
You did not.
I'm
You did
going-
not.
I'm going to.
That's okay, we sent it out again
I,
because we had to send it out. We do have some students. We had to do a little tracking of them down because they might not have seen that email. So we were able to.
They don't check, you know they don't check their email.
My kids don't check their
No.
email, so I know.
None of my kids,
Um,
none of the 200 at school, nor my 2
Yeah.
at home.
So Frank met with a couple of them to say, hey, and they're like, of course I'm going to be on it. So, yeah. The meetings are 5 to 6:30. We do eat, which is also a
Oh, there
benefit.
you go.
But they are
Be willing
working
to learn.
meetings.
Yeah.
They are working meetings. And by that I mean, we're asking for idea generation. You know, we want people to weigh in.
Yep.
So that is all. I'll have more the next time after this Tuesday's meeting because we'll come back with what we pulled together.
Is one of these papers that,
What?
about what you
The
projected?
timeline?
Yeah.
No, I linked it in our agenda that'll be posted, or that is posted
It's like,
online.
you do it, you talk to the hyperlink.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when I figure out how to, make this public, well, now that I'm not
Now you
myself
lost
off, that will also be, we're going to have a very specific spot on the website for comprehensive planning, just so everybody knows what is happening with it. And I knocked myself out, as usual.
We really are good at that.
I hit the wrong button every time.
Uh-huh.
It's all about the details. What?
This is sure.
Okay, there we go, sorry. All right,
Okay, so that was it for comprehensive planning.
yep, just informational tonight.
Anybody have any other questions on that? No? Community? All right.
All right, so there was a request to discuss the teacher evaluation system. I do not intend to go super deep in this because many of us have got a graduate degree and the ability to supervise staff. So, but what I want to do is
That's what these.
sort of very broad, correct, and those are reference materials. But what I want to do is very broadly explain, because sometimes I'm not sure people outside of the education arena understand that when we're talking about teacher supervision and evaluation, and Trina can speak to this, it's not just about the administrator coming in and supervising. There are other facets to teacher performance that also go into the calculation of their end of year evaluations. And so that is a factor. So it's not just I go in and I observe. And very often in a supervision and evaluation plan for a school district, walkthroughs are not evaluative. So what I mean by that is we are implementing a walkthrough system in where every principal and directors and administrators are providing feedback to staff instructionally. That is not part of their evaluation. And, now obviously if we see something horrendous, that's a different conversation and there's different follow-up mechanisms to formally observe a teacher. So really quickly, without boring everyone. This was riveting, and I'm sure Trina had to go through this, Act 13 training, but ultimately there was a change to how staff was supervised. It started with Act 82, which was what we were all working from in terms of an evaluation. And then there was, in 2020, you know, that magical year that everybody wants to forget about, Act 13 came out. While we were all in the midst and throes of a pandemic, we all came back and they said, oh, by the way, you're implementing Act 13 and you're changing the evaluation system. We were like, cool. And so what that meant for us is that it really changed certain things about the flexibility of evaluation. It did increase the value of formal evaluation. So that formal process where a building administrator goes in and says, I'm coming in, let's talk about all the domains, right? This might not mean anything. That increased a little bit from what it was. And so, but it also created criteria based on what type of professional you were. So in our system, classroom teachers, non-teaching professionals who are still teachers, and principals, all, their formulas all essentially changed. And this is, when I say non-teaching professionals, you know, they're counselors. They don't have any instructional, essentially. I always say they're not rostered. Nurses,
Speech and language
coaches.
pathologists.
Correct. So I say this because it gave a lot of control back to school districts to define who those groups were, ironically. This is essentially how you're defined and what calculates. So we had to look at, you know, I could be a coach and I could have building level data. So scores could be attributed back to me. I will tell you right now, most of our non-teaching professionals don't. You know, they don't. And I can show you here.
You mean like a PFAS score?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
not giving that to a coach or.
No,
like, okay.
and you can see, I printed this, because this is how we locally define who those people were. And why I'm telling you this is because their calculation in this is based on their role. And so if you look across, so observation and practice, if you're a classroom teacher or a temporary professional, that's somebody who could be non-tenured, right, new to the profession, 100% of your evaluation is based on observations by a principal or supervisor. Classroom teachers, 70% is based on this. And then if you look at non-teaching professionals, if I'm a school psychologist, it's 100%. It's based on how many times I come in and evaluate you, and they have a different rubric, essentially, than classroom teachers, right? So that's, the purpose of this is just to understand that some of us, the observation by principals has more value than others. So if I'm a counselor, my entire evaluation is essentially 90% of it is weighted on supervision and observation. And so they have a very unique tool that talks about very specific things related to their field. Social workers have their own evaluation rubric. Classroom teachers, generally, they're all constructed, family needs improvement, proficient, and distinguished. And so what I included in your packet is how they objectively describe those. Danielson's framework is extensive. There are 4 domains. Within those domains, there are components, and within those components, there are elements.
Good Lord.
Now,
It's pretty easy. The 4 domains kind of make sense if you just look at each.
yep.
The bullet points are like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that makes sense. You know what I mean? So it's not that scary.
It's not, and when you observe, so teachers are required to have a pre-observation conference where we're looking at domain 1, which is planning and preparation. What have you done in order to design this lesson to be responsive to kids? You know, what is the data that you have included? What do you know about your content to be able to differentiate that? Domain 2 is really the classroom environment. You know, so when we talk about restorative practices or responsive classroom, and you know, there is a component of respect and rapport that's a part of that. What kind of culture does your classroom have for learners in there? Behavior is a huge one. You know, and if you look at Danielson's criteria, if you're moving all the way into distinguished, students are taking a tremendous responsibility in all of those components, right? Instruction. And then there's professional responsibilities, you know, and that really is supplemental to what you see in the classroom. There's a lot of facets of that, you know, about record keeping, communication with families, your commitment to your own professional development, and your relationships with and among staff, the staff in the building. And so now, what I would say is the point of the Danielson rubric is to be evidence-based. So the process of supervision, a teacher or an administrator goes in, they collect evidence, and then they offer a rating.
But that's
it's the-
different than the walkthrough system that you developed.
Well, so yes,
Okay,
for the purposes of evaluation.
okay.
A walkthrough is for feedback. Same tools. So our walkthroughs right now are domains 2 and 3, classroom environment and instruction. We want to see what's happening with you and the kids, with the kids together, what instruction, what type of questioning, who's doing the work.
And you
is
pick
often-
1 or 2 per year, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying? Okay.
yeah. And so we've tried to really focus. We just started walkthroughs last year. Right,
Okay.
yeah.
But
Strange.
you were looking around.
So-
This is just, you mean a formal, like a.
Correct. We
Okay.
were giving formal feedback for
Yeah,
the
okay.
first time that was immediate
Yeah.
and related directly to domains 2 and 3, right? So what was happening is there were classroom visitations and there were notes, but not necessarily directly tied to the language of Danielson.
I think what she means is like, they have this as like let's pretend you get an A+ when you go through the distinguished or whatever for this rating. But the walkthroughs, it isn't like, I got 3 Ds and 2 Bs, so it all averages together. The walkthroughs don't give a score that factors into this.
Okay.
The walkthrough is just for the teacher to know,
Yeah.
like, here's what I saw, here's, you know,
Immediate
some ways you
feedback.
could improve, or just, yeah.
And it's also, you know, what I'm working with now, principal evaluations are a totally different ballgame, but also based on Danielson's leadership criteria. So what I would say is, so what the conversation I have with principals about walkthroughs is not about quantity necessarily. Like, you could have done 200 really terrible walkthroughs and given no constructive feedback. So the questions that I ask is, you know, what were your findings? When you looked at the rubric, where did you see that some staff needed support? Questioning and discussion techniques is always one of them. Always, always, always. And then, how did you support? If you saw that was a common need in your building, what did you do? Right? In a faculty meeting, did you discuss it? Did you bring in practices of excellence? There's really good work happening. Are they sharing that? Have you designed opportunities for them to talk about, I did this lesson, this was great. So this is something we're going to continue to work on because, like I said, this is the second year we've used Danielson's Domain 2 and 3 with the actual automatic feedback. So,
Can I ask, I don't think I asked for this explanation. I don't care to know who asked for it, but can you share why?
so we've been talking a lot about our TSI plan
Okay.
It is a part of TSI. There was a discussion about what is the purpose of this? Why is it in our improvement plan? What is its value? What are you actually looking for? Because I think that from an organizational perspective, we communicated, it's because teachers need feedback, principals need feedback. It is critical in order for school improvement to happen, for us to be supervising and monitoring instruction. We talk a lot about data, but we don't talk a lot about supervisory data.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But it's something that Dr. Roach and I talk with principals about.
Well, this
They
goes-
call them heat maps. That's what, on the back end, supervisors run heat maps, which is what ratings were given. At one point, teachers were evaluated on, it was called a correlational rating, where, principals, the ratings you gave to teachers should, in theory, align with the student performance from their classes. And if there was a discrepancy, your rating was low. So it translated into a point value.
I mean, it makes sense, kind of.
So that's gone. With Act 13, that went away.
Well, there was a lot of conversations about who the students you're giving me to start with.
Correct.
And where they start from. And then, are you giving me students that the heat map will never be what you think it is, and that now impacts my evaluation, and
Yeah.
And I,
yeah, and then we won't even get into PVAS, a number of days the kids come in. If they come in at this point of the year, they do count, they don't count, this.
No, if they're absolutely 88 days, it's still, well, why
Yeah.
didn't you teach them how to
Yeah.
diagram
Right,
sentences?
right.
Yeah, they were in jail, you know?
Listen, I was a high school
Not
emotional
my
support
current-
teacher.
Oh, yeah, you're, why?
We had our
Why aren't
moments.
they writing dissertations, Dr.
The
Farida?
behavioral component of instruction got a little dicey some days. I mean, it just did. So, but I say this because those are the potential values of the observation process for staff, according to Act 13. Right? Teachers also develop student performance measures, and they have building scores that complete their pie, essentially. So I just wanted to offer up, that's why it's part of TSI. Because really, some of those sweet spots, and we've talked about, it's our special ed population that's struggling, and how often do we actually get in there and give feedback? In our seats, right? And so, it's a...
But I think, so the Danielson, that framework is required, but sort of how you implement it is where you have a little leeway.
Yeah, I mean, there is no obligation for walkthroughs
Yeah.
in the evaluation process whatsoever. It's
It's
best
a smart thing to
practice.
do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from a supervisory perspective, I think that it is a best practice, and teachers really, they want to see. I would imagine, at least teachers that I supervise.
Yeah, there's a whole piece of visibility, there's a whole piece of knowing what's going on, and part of my goal in terms of getting in more classrooms is when they come, I was in that teacher's classroom when they were talking about this topic, just happened to be there. I mean, all that familiarity is an important piece to that visibility and that oversight. And yeah, I think when you see something that is way out of line, if you do, the observation, the walkthrough can become evaluative if you're seeing something that's catastrophic. To no, stop, we're not that's what that was intended to do. Now we're going to have a different conversation, but we got to follow that process.
I had a superintendent once who used to say, you inspect what you expect. I have adopted that, even in my house. But, and so I was the principal of an elementary school for several years, very small, 13 teachers. Every day I was in their classroom. That isn't right.
Yeah.
And they didn't mind telling me that, but it wasn't, it was not intended to be evaluative. It was intended to know what was going on in the classroom and be there if they needed me. So, that's just a theory of supervision.
Okay.
All right, I'm done.
any other comments or questions on that one?
No, a lot of good information on this.
Yeah. Okay.
last month, I shared really just little tidbits in regards to the cyclical monitoring for continual improvement, or acronym better known for CMCI. So I'll probably refer to that over the next few months for you. So just to share a little bit of updates on where we are right now. So last month when we met, I think it was the Thursday before the 19th. On the 19th, I met virtually with our viewer advisor. That's the individual who will come in during the actual monitoring piece. So I met with her, and during that time, we went over sort of a lot of the specifics that will occur, the expectations, but part of that was she reviewed with us then and there 8 different areas that you can see listed up there. Graduation, dropout, suspension, due process, public school enrollment, educational environment, which is what we refer to as least restrictive environment, participation in the PSSAs, as well as passive testing. So she literally, when we met there, shared potential improvement plans prior to anything even happening. And this is all just based on some of that data. So I'm just going to very briefly, on here, I share with you out of the 8, the areas met target. And then the 3 areas where it would state, just based on the state targets, et cetera, a potential improvement plan. So I'm just going to kind of go over that. The interesting thing too is in these different 8 areas, they don't look at the exact same year every year. So for example, with graduation, they looked at 22, 23, and again, this is for special education students. So the state target was 85.9%. We did meet that target. We were actually at 97.5%, which is very high. So we did meet that one. The next one was the dropout. And for this one, they actually look at the years 22, 23 as well. And the target rate for the state for dropout rates for special ed students was at 12.79%. Upper Kirk, we met this target as well. During that school year, our data came in at over 22, 23 at 2.5% of a dropout rate, which is awesome.
5% below, yeah.
We'll, over time, maybe talk about that a little bit more. So basically, they're saying we met the target. If they happen to be looking at the 2023-24 school year, which is just what passed, and again, we can explain and talk about a lot of that. I'm not so sure the results here would be the exact same, stating that we met the target. I believe it would be the opposite, and we would be on an improvement plan.
Which is also a factor in TSI. So not only are we evaluated on that future ready portion for that subgroup data, but from the Bureau of Special Ed, they're looking at the same targets and puts us in a different series of corrective action, which is what those improvement plans are.
However, they do look, it's interesting to see the years that and it's just by chance that we're being monitored this year, so they're going back 2 years, and that's the data that they're going to pull. Obviously, we already know that it continues to be an area, special ed or not special ed, with kids and the dropout rate. So that will just continue there. The next section had to do with suspension. Again, this is an area, these are for kids with disabilities. We did meet this target. They looked at 22, 23 as well, and the target rate was a 1.66% rate. And Upper Kirk, our special education students, the rate was at just 1.04%. So that target was met as well. Due process is really just, it's really not applicable. This has to do with, are we actually, over the year that they're looking at, were we actually in a due process hearing? And we haven't to date. Public school enrollment is for us. We have met that target. That has to do with, you look at the school district number of students that we have, which is, I think, that October 1 count, and then December 1st count, or what we refer to as our 12-1 count, is our special education student numbers. We have for a number of years. met that target, met that rate. So we are currently at, I believe it's 16.3% of our students. The target rate for, the target rate for that is at least 1% or 2% higher than that with this across the state. So we're at 16.3%, which is in a very good place for that, for us, for the district. Educational environment is one, that's what we refer to as least restrictive environment. That is where there's 3 areas that they look at there. One of those is when they look at 80% or more of your special education students are out in the general education population. The next one has to do less than 40% of your students in the general education population. And then lastly, it's other settings, which is basically our students that are placed out of district. We have met the target you can see up there for those 2 areas. We have met that target for several years, I will say. They're referring to this one, which is interesting. This target, they're looking at 23, 24, which I had shared all the other pieces. They were looking at 22, 23, which is interesting. So we have met those 2 targets. I won't share the specifics of that. For the other settings, that has probably been for several years. I think we talked about this a little bit before. When we look at our students, we're not a district the size of a North Penn, the size of an Allentown, which would likely lead to continuum of special education supports and services, probably with every type of program out there. Why? Because we have the numbers. Our district here, yes, do we have great and amazing programs looking at our continuum of supports and services. However, we're not a very large school district to say we could facilitate and would continue year after year to have the numbers of a K-3 MDS program. Like we don't. So that has a little bit to do with this as well.
And if I can just add in, this, even when I was the director, this was an area where we were in improvement. And as Carol said, sometimes those complex disabilities, we don't have the resources to really support. The other end of that continuum is there are some students with behavioral needs that we place out of district because, there are a variety of reasons, but that is
So are you
going
getting
to.
dinged for that though?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did get things
So-
committee, yeah.
Yeah, so, a lot of districts have, I'm not sure,
That seems,
Trina, Boyertown has this, but, some districts the size of North Penn have an alternative program, alternative
Yeah.
school.
Northfield
Northbridge.
has one too.
They have a whole program, and honestly, I think over the last 10 years, Carol and I have talked about what is the cost benefit of that. It's, at this point, we'd rather write the improvement plan because we're not sure we have the bandwidth to have an alternative type of program. And so,
Where
but
do you send?
So we have a number of out-of-district programs. We go up north a little bit, not too far. Being that we do live up here, up at the northern tip of Montgomery County, there doesn't seem to be quite as many programs, but we have it. We do travel, which then again, when you talk about the transportation costs, that is a big deal there as well. So for these kids, it also comes down to a little piece to add to this is our students with, where there's an incident that occurs in school. And in lieu of expulsion, there may be an agreement with that. There are a portion of students over the years where based on, because of our policies, whatever the incident may be, the policy violation, it automatically triggers and moves to potentially placing the student in lieu of expulsion.
Right.
So
So
those
you have to
kids-
balance, like,
Yep.
how many do we have, how often does this happen? Like, I don't know, how many in estimate would we have in a year?
To be
5,
putting
10?
out based
Yeah.
on those policy
5,
violations
3,
last
2?
year for special ed? No, I would say we weren't too low last year. I thought we were between 3 and 5.
A little higher.
I
But
don't-
to, create
Still
a
doesn't make
whole
And that
program for
also
that.
includes our gen ed students, however, they're not included in any of these numbers. But we've had a couple of students that aren't special ed either.
And as much as, you know, what you're alluding to is how we essentially feel, as much as we know we're going to be required to write an improvement plan, I'm not sure that we would make a different decision.
I think it's fine, yeah.
And so, you know, just know when we get corrective action, we try to say, we're not sure if it's in the best interest of all the kids or even the staff, sometimes to not place kids.
Yeah, and back in, it was following the 1819, which is, Andrea and I had developed, it had come up very late after, if you remember, there was a lot of changes there during that 1819, that summer, and superintendent and special education department. Anyway, due to that compliance monitoring at that time, we had to develop, once again, as she just said, for least restrictive environment, and it was really based on our students out of district. That continues to be, and it's very likely that following this compliance monitoring, we'll develop another improvement plan that will be, just really the important thing is, I think, to continue working on those things. So, if no questions here, to continue, this one is also a very interesting one. The PSSA, and this is participation. So what they do, and they ding you on, is this is strictly participation of students with disabilities. So I can tell you that this is over, again, the 21-22 school year that they look at. Not 22-23, not 23-24. In grades 4 and in grades 11 for the Keystone, the participation rate, we have met that target. In our grade 8 for PSSA, in ELA and in math, the participation rate, we did not meet the state's targeted rate. So,
Do you know what the rate was, what we
yeah, so 95% in 21-22 was the expectation across the state, or the state target, and in grade 8 we were, in 22-23 we were 86.7% for ELA, and it's interesting how it's different, but for math it was 91.1%.
So I'm going to weigh in. There's a groundswell initiative for the notion of opting out because, you know, sometimes it's even a social media blitz. And, you know, respectfully, we respect parents, you know, religious exemption rights, but please know that, you know, as the momentum grows behind that, it is detrimental to the district.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's a reality that we face. There does seem to be something about the middle level where it's always been the highest number of opt-outs.
Wasn't this also, I mean, if they were talking about 21-22, this was the first year back after COVID. So
Yes.
people were also, I think,
And we had a huge,
Yep.
very
correct.
negative towards
Correct.
PSSAs because
So it's still,
of the timing.
it's still there. We still hear it whenever PSSA reminders or Keystone reminders go out. You know, the list grows because our director of curriculum, Mrs. Bast, sits with the principals, meets with the parent to make sure they follow the process through. But inevitably, it is a parent's right to opt out. So, for religious reasons.
Do we know
What-
if they looked at 22-23? Will we meet the criteria then?
Because it is 95% always. It's 95, the expectation is 95% participation.
Yeah, they're only got 21-22. And then the list of the
It's just funky that they were looking at
22-23%,
22-23.
we have that.
Sorry?
For the 22-23, I have those percentages there. And 21-22 and 22-23 are not this last school year, right?
Well,
Yeah, what was
that's what I
it?
want to know, 22-23.
22-23.
Yeah, so 22-23, it's those percentages in eighth grade that they did not, they didn't make it grade grade. Now, what I can tell you, again, when we're looking at our students, special education students, we have made a point, like we talked about this with administrators as well and brought this up, a good point. We're adding to our agenda when we meet with our group special ed teachers. Like last Thursday, we met with our Hereford special education teachers and we talked about this. And we know that people can opt out, that, just as Andrea said, for whatever determination the reason is that they're making it. But we need to make sure that our special ed teachers are fully aware of the impact of this. So meaning, and the principals. And so if they can speak more to it, in the end, the parent will make the determination they make. But I'm wondering, over the years, have we really taken the time on the side, because it's typically coming down with, they're communicating with the special ed teacher, just to make sure they fully sort of understand and those pieces. So we are making a point to really speak about it as well.
And I think sometimes for parents who have students with academic struggles, disabilities, you know, the older they get, the further away success feels, especially on standardized assessments. And so there's sometimes that test apathy, they're not going to do well anyway. So I'm just going to X. You know, and that's, having been a learning support teacher and a special ed teacher at the high school level, I certainly engaged in a ton of those conversations. But really, it's your chance to put your best foot forward, you know, and do however well you can possibly do. But it is hard, and you know, I've observed kids struggle on Keystones, on the PSSAs when they were in high school, and they don't necessarily see any value back for it, which is a struggle. So, you know, the better we can support the family and why it's important, we think maybe they're more inclined to participate.
This is new that they're dinging the district for opt-outs. Last year,
Well,
it
participation,
started,
correct, yeah.
and this year.
It was honestly post-COVID.
Is there any chance that you're hearing buzz that they would stop doing this? I just think it's kind
Participation's
of,
always been a part of that.
Always.
I mean,
It has?
It's always been a part.
but for every, like, really?
Participation in general, sure, yeah. That's been-
It's just not been a
It may not have been something that you, I mean, it was always there, whether you got an improvement plan for that or not is a different conversation.
But I thought it was, maybe it was just the religious exemption is now counted against you or something like, because I
Right
thought
now,
this was sort
I
of.
believe it's only the religious exemption, regardless of what you, I mean,
Yeah.
they'll say it's, I mean, there are people walk in and go, religious, I was here, I said, touched it, you know, and that's, their mind's made up, you know. Or there's still an impression that we're only doing testing so that we can get money. I mean, it's just, you know, it's all of those things.
Maybe we could consider some ways the board could help put out, you know, I don't know, information or something that would be supportive of opting in, making sure you opt in.
Yeah, I just think the communication, any which way, or whoever can do it, because when you look at it, like, I'm telling you that she's already communicated that upper her, we're gonna be on an improvement plan. That's one of the 3 areas, and we all just talked about it, so, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's much more other than.
So you're saying
It's all the help we can get.
Special
Yeah.
ed, like you're saying, it could be test apathy, I understand that. And
Yeah.
then I truly don't know what, they think you're getting money,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
they
these people, I
won't
mean,
take it.
whatever, I mean, they're only doing scores for us to get money, meaning not me personally, just the district in
Right.
general. Or it's, you know, they just don't believe in it, or they don't
Or
value
it's
it.
collecting some sort of,
Quite honestly, there's some people
Yeah.
that know their kids aren't gonna do well, so why am I gonna count my kid again? Why are they gonna get this letter that says you're below basic again?
Right.
At 5th or 6th grade, I'm gonna tap it out and go, "No, we're not doing this. It doesn't matter for what you're doing. I mean, in their mind, you know, we're trying to help and provide support, and the teams use this as they're trying to provide this tiered intervention and all those types of things, but at some point, they don't see any value in it. I mean, I think definitely was a push a couple of years ago where it was just show what you know. Just go and just do the best you can and try to de-emphasize it a little bit. Yeah, there was definitely, when it was tied to scores, I think it was like, okay, let's go, we're gonna, as opposed to just get in there and do your best, you know? But I mean, you can all appreciate as a parent, we know it's gonna, this kid, we know that my kid here he's gonna get below basic because he just doesn't test well, or wasn't this, I mean, so I'm not gonna send him through that,
Right.
you know? So, there's a lot of reasons. It's complicated.
And the next one is a little bit interesting as well, where it's the third one area for the improvement plan. This is PASA. So this is, they look at 22, 23. So for years, it's always been the expectation that a district does not have more or higher than 1% of their special education population participating in the PASA versus the PSSI. Again, if you really look at that and you, let's say you pull a list from year to year on your students with an intellectual disability, or you could be looking at autism, any of those areas to the severity of it. And based on your numbers, again, that could have to do with your move-in numbers, your move-out numbers, all of those different areas. So during, correct, so during the 22-23 school year, Upper Perk, in comparison to, we had 1.5%. The expectation is 1%. Now, this is one area that I'm not 100% sure, but we're going to be able to probably confirm that, because we'll find out specifics on the improvement plans that following compliance. This is one of them that within the 30 days for each of them, if the information or the data is improved or better, they'll remove it and you will not receive a request that you have to develop a plan. This is one area, just again, based on 24, 25 and our potential numbers for kids taking PASA, it's a very good possibility we'll be under the 1%. So if that's the case, this would remove. But again, next year could be different, right? So.
And I just must say, as I said with the other improvement plan for other settings, if there are 1.5% of students in Upper Perk that meet the criteria for the PASA, we would not say to a child with an intellectual disability, sorry, you're taking the PSSAs. Like, that's just inhumane altogether. So
Again, it seems like a weird.
it doesn't
Weird way to
account for the
punish.
fact that you could
Yeah.
actually have more than 1% of kids who are eligible, which was the circumstance. So,
And there's very specific criteria that the teacher has to look at in order to make that determination, so.
you know, I'm not trying to poo-poo the improvement process, but I am saying sometimes there
moving
is more than
target.
1%
Yeah.
of
Right,
kids
right.
who are
And that's
eligible
just-
for that test.
That's just the fact.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
So those two, even including, like we're explaining, you know, the other areas where kids place out of district. These are the three areas that it looks like we likely could be looking at. So we'll see, because there'll be the rest of that timeline for there, and then I'll kind of wrap up here unless you have questions, is that meeting was on August 19th. Now, our actual compliance monitoring or the CMCI dates are on November the 12th is what we have. It's called the administrative interview. I actually was hoping or wishing that it would have been in person. However, I think since COVID, they've just never gone back to it. So it's going to be a virtual interview. We'll have a team of billing administrators, district-wide administrators. We'll likely have a PowerPoint sort of showing our bureau. It's presenting, really. It's called an administrative interview with the bureau advisor. And very likely, perhaps the month following, we'll be able to share too some of the information that we shared, depending on what our dates are and that. And then on the 13th and 14th is when the peer monitors, there'll be 3 of them, they will physically come to our office here, as well as the peer advisor, and that's, I think I shared some information with you. They'll go to all the buildings. We have a list of students already that we'll be uploading and sharing documents with them. There will be student observations, teacher interviews, special education teacher interviews, parent interviews that these monitors will go over, and they'll have about 10 days to do the interviews, you know, after they leave us. So that is those pieces, and then I think it's typically within 30 days of the monitoring dates, we'll get specific updates and information on potential next steps, needs, whatever they're saying. The one thing I didn't add very quickly is the surveys. So we were required this year, I think every so many years, PD and the Bureau, they do seem to change and add on some additional items for monitoring. So surveys were required this year. So what that meant was, by the end of September 27th, all of our Upper Perk teachers, special education and general education teachers are required to take a survey. Our students that are 14 or over are asked to take a survey, as well as it's going out to, I think it's been included, going out from Alexis on the Friday updates for parent surveys. This has gone on just for our special education parents. So that is continuing on, that's a piece of it as well. We'll get results from those surveys from each of those groups. They tell me about 5 days after, probably about October 4th or 5th. And then the expectation is we need to review those surveys. What areas are we seeing that whether it's students, teachers, parents are seeing some improvement needs or making some recommendations, and then we need to address them probably as part of our admin interview on that in November. So any questions on that? Okay, and then the only thing Andrea and I had included, this is really, and I think every year we'll probably bring this up. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and what's attached there, it's just the what they actually look for. Just if you had
So
any
you have a
desire
hard
to know what they come in and actually ask us, and what we assess ourselves on, those are the topics.
And you have hard copies there if you want to take a look at them. They're all the areas we'll go through.
So the last bullet is, I always use the opportunity at EPS to remind everyone of their procedural and policy rights and our obligations for notice that are given to families. I have probably used the word transparency 4 times this evening, and I'm doing it intentionally. Our policies dictate the rights of parents. And so some that have often come up to our attention is the review of instructional materials, exemption from instruction, and who is eligible for homeless. I did not put homebound because the buildings generally work through that and we need medical, but I can always share it. The first 3 are coming out of the Pupil Services and Curriculum Office. This is a reminder that you are obligated to go through the process for reviewing and requesting exemption. I like to remind people, you actually have to come in and identify and look at the materials and state what your exemption is. The policy is very specific about if it is approved, how that process works. The school district does not tell the child you're exempt from this. They approve the exemption. It is the child's responsibility to know what the exemption is and to advocate for it and actually get up and leave. We do make special consideration for our youngest learners in K-3. So I just put it out there because often there are questions around that, and it's in our updates. I put it out, I send reminders, it's in the back to school presentations of principals, it's required. So this is our public notice, and then we also have obligations to provide notice and inform related to students with disabilities and what their rights and procedures are. And so I can turn it over to Kara a little bit, but these are up there for parents as a reminder.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions, but as Andrea said, that just that annual notice where just, items are being distributed in regards to child fine obligations of the district, and that information, which it is located on our district website. It is in our student handbooks. Montgomery County the IU works with us, and they provide, and it is posted digitally as well as hard copies for, it's probably 10 to 12 newspapers in Montgomery County as well to share all of that information. So we wanted to make sure we got that out. And then the other, you'll look at, they all seem to be policies in the 113s, which all has to do with special education students, whether it's with students with discipline needs, screening evaluations, which also is a piece of that child find as well, and then confidentiality for students with disabilities in regards to records and communications and FERPA. So we just wanted to make sure they're sort of all listed, and anybody have any questions?
The only question I have is, great that Peg is here from the policy committee. None of these are on any upcoming agenda. We went through
Eventually they
these.
will be.
I feel like we recently went through at least some of these. I mean, I remember the 251, I think we just did last year.
Correct. The
I thought we maybe
100s,
did
the
some others as
100s
well.
were a little distant. There's a couple that are pending revision. We have a couple that are back on the docket from the July PNN update. So they changed some definitions of homelessness, so that was done last year.
Yeah.
That was done in the spring of last year. Our 1051, 1052 was revised the year before, during the later part of 22, 23. So they're definitely recent history.
And all of, it looks like all the special education ones that are all listed here, they're around that 2019. So perhaps,
Yeah, they were working, I mean, we started zeros and ones, so,
yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. I think it's helpful to have all these with links to them too for the public to go and read and review as needed, you know, across those.
Well, and often when parents have concerns, they come to this group to talk about those types of things, and so, you know, it's good to just remind people at the beginning of the year that they're there.
Okay.
And that goes no further, like this isn't going to show up on our next agenda. This is,
No,
okay.
we just do it as a public notice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, there's nothing tonight that needs to be moved forward. This is just more all informational. I think it needs to be moved
Yeah.
forward to the next workshop report meeting.
And our next board meeting is our elementary and middle school.
Our next TPS meeting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, you know, I'm open to, does the committee have any requests for us to bring? There will be some curriculum things that will be coming forth, you know, as the year goes on, as that process continues. But oftentimes, we hear from the committee, we'd love to hear about X. So if there's anything that you want us to bring forward, we're happy to do so.
Okay.
I'm sorry, next meeting is in regard to middle school? Is that what you're saying?
Middle and high school, they're beginning of year data presentations and building goals.
Okay.
That's at the board meeting, not this next meeting.
No, our EBS.
Next EBS.
Next
Okay,
EBS,
that's what I was trying
okay.
to see if she's.
Last year, I think you were here, we did it in one meeting and it was a marathon. So we suggested
Okay.
let's split it out.
Okay.
because We want to give everybody their fair attention and it just needs to be split into two. I think it's
Okay, cool. And
We will stay
this,
engaged.
the Hope for Tomorrow presentation, you said this is the first time you're doing it? And, because this is the first time I've seen, or so it may have been there. But was it presented previously or no?
No, this is
Okay.
the first time. We've,
Alright.
QPR, this is our third year.
Yeah.
Hope for Tomorrow is a presentation to the, you know, the entire grade level. That's the first time we've done it.
It's a video that they watch?
No,
or-
it's, they come in.
Oh, people come in?
Yeah,
Assembly?
Mission Kids, yeah.
Example.
And our parent, what's at the link, just like, it's their
Yeah,
website?
it
or-
explains what the presentation
Okay.
is, it gives you details about the topics. I mean, it is suicide prevention, so
Uh-huh.
because they didn't have a parent preview, like we do for
Right,
QPR.
I was just curious if there's something more like the parent preview, but
Yeah, no.
maybe they have, I'll do some research,
Well, and
maybe they have
that's-
stuff online.
There-
If I
there's
have questions, I'll
definitely-
let you know.
There's definitely stuff online, which
Okay.
is, if you follow that link, you
Okay.
can, I mean, I can post it if you want, but,
I'll look at it.
so we just want to be sensitive to the topic.
Yeah.
And certainly it's something that some parents do elect to not have their children participate in.
Okay,
So,
okay.
All right. Any other questions? You're good? Okay. I don't have any other agenda items for this evening. Next meeting, as you said, is October 17th. Anything from the public and/or board members? Yes, Ms. Pennypacker?
Back to the teacher evaluation.
Yeah.
Trina, I asked for that information. I requested that information because at the last TSI presentation, there's a lot of terminology being thrown around, Danielson, and I suggested to Dr. Roach that it would be a good idea for the rest of the board to have an understanding of that language. You and I get it, but the others might not.
Sounds good.
So that's why I asked for it.
Yeah.
So my question is, will this information be presented to the full board? At least some minimal information?
Well, when you share that comment at the meeting, I filed it away. I had planned on putting it on January's board
Okay.
retreat, because that's when the time we're all here.
Fine.
Kind of taking 20 minutes or
Fine.
half hour to do that, and then Dr. Farina had said that she was doing it here. So if it's still a general request for everyone, we can develop that. That was the initial plan, at least.
I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, I mean, as a non-educator, it is helpful to read
Yeah.
and see and understand it, so
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
do
put on
appreciate
the
it.
board retreat in
Yeah,
January,
I
just
think
as
it's
an
fine.
FYI, one of those blocks of time.
Well, and I think, there were some changes even in the language around culturally relevant sustaining educational practices that are being embedded in the Danielson framework. So, that's new. We just started presenting that in teacher induction because that language changed. So,
Even from a teacher future, which we're going to be at the end of this year, teacher negotiations, right? There's still conversations that teachers have working with Mrs. Bast and Mrs. Rothermel and Dr. Farina on the selected measure. That is another number in there that that really ties into the number of the students you have and your individual impact as well. So I know that always comes up from time to time, where you get a unique question about what is the measure, and is that an accurate reflection of the work that's going on for, as Trina said, 88 days versus, the whole year? And is that something to be negotiated? So at the very least, the board would be aware of that to see what that conversation is, if it comes up. It has come up in the past, no doubt.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I will entertain a motion.
Second.
Okay. Okay, no questions? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.